I can't believe I'm even making a video on this, but recently, former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard decided to write one of the wildest military history tweets I've ever seen in my life. I'm gonna go ahead and read this, and I think all of you, we're all gonna have the same reaction this GIF does. So let me go ahead and read this real quick. As we remember Japan's aggression in the Pacific, we need to ask ourselves this question. Is the remilitarization of Japan, which is presently underway, truly a good idea? We need to be careful that short-sighted, self-serving leaders do not end up bringing us again face-to-face with a remilitarized Japan. Hashtag Pearl Harbor 82. Now, the implications of this is absolutely insane. Essentially, she is saying, you know, we need to remember what Japan did all the way back in the 40s during World War II. And guess what? If we keep giving them more weapons, they're gonna do it again. I mean, seriously, this is essentially, she might as well have written, Japan will do Pearl Harbor again if we don't be careful. Now, let's go ahead and dig into this, and I promise you, I am so sorry I'm even having to waste your time with this basic military history lesson. First things first, let us remember exactly what happened during World War II. Japan did some very heinous acts on Pearl Harbor. Japan did bad things. In China, South Korea, they were not a good military. They acted in extremely bad faith. I am not sticking up for the imperialism of Japan and how they conducted themselves as a military. They were very morally wrong, and that is why essentially we had to drop the nukes because they could not be stopped. They were a very strong military and a very aggressive military. But essentially, we got them to surrender, which again, very humble move by Japan. We got them to surrender, and essentially we told them, you are not allowed to rearm yourselves in the fashion of going on the offense. You are not allowed to attack other countries. You are done doing that, Japan. However, you are allowed to defend yourselves, Japan. It would be very criminal and very bad for the United States to essentially disarm all of Japan, and any country ever could just go ahead and invade them. Now, after World War II, there was a realization of, you know what, maybe Japan and the United States could get along, at least with economy, and not only that, maybe the United States could utilize Japan for military bases, because there's other countries in the region, Russia, that pose a really big threat to the United States, and not only that, North Korea, and having Japan here as its own little island, it would be a great idea just to work with them and maybe use them as a staging area. Now, as far as the rearming of Japan, this was an extremely misleading statement, and what you need to understand is that Japan is being rearmed to its full minimalist. And what I mean by that is the United States likes to arm its military to its full potential. Japan is in the opposite direction. Essentially, they arm themselves enough to defend themselves, but never enough to actually go on the offensive. Japan still has to follow this treaty, but again, Japan, they have been rearming themselves. They have a strong navy, they have an air force, they have a military, but as far as creating a military strong enough, again, to actually go after the US military is absolutely a joke and really a dumb comparison. And we'll get into the actual numbers here in a second, but again, you need to understand that Japan is really not that well liked in their region. I mean, South Korea and Japan have had one of the worst pasts in military history, and really South Korea, they just deal with Japan at this point. They are kind of military partners because they share common enemies with North Korea. North Korea is always launching munitions over at Japan, and because South Korea and North Korea, they have a common enemy, it's best just to work together. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend that South Korea and Japan are bests of friends. So again, remember, just because Japan is rearmed, they have zero allies in this region other than the United States, who is like legit a military ally. Like, if Japan goes to war, the United States will stick up for Japan. And when you talk about 2023 in today's context, if there's one country that you need to be extremely careful of, or really these two countries in the area, if Japan did not have a sufficient military, China and Russia would absolutely wipe Japan off the face of the earth. I mean, they would be so irrelevant. The Japanese would not be able to stand up for themselves. And if Japan falls, guess what? The United States economy completely crashes. So this notion of, you know what, let's not arm Japan, let's let them fend for themselves, they'll figure it out, they have a strong enough economy. Japan relies on the United States relies on Japan, and again, if Japan does not have a military to defend themselves, China and Russia will go after them. The last thing Japan needs to worry about is what's happening over in the United States, and especially over in Pearl Harbor. I also want to point out the fact that we need to be extremely careful calling out other countries and their history, because you could do that with every single country to include the United States. This is like saying we shouldn't have any military bases in the South because the South will rise again. They will turn their arms against us. Or we need to be very careful working with Germany because remember the mustache guy back in World War II? Or even, Italy, any Axis power, any country that flip-flop like Romania. So again, we need to be very careful being like, hey, let's remember the past and weaponize it against the United States. I think it's very important that we always remember the past and we can use it to educate ourselves and to remember why doing things back then might have been a really bad idea, especially using your military in very evil ways. But this notion from Tulsi Gabbard of saying, as we remember Japan's aggression in the Pacific, again, the United States, you could say that against the United States. As you can remember what the South did, there are many instances you can say, but you catch my drift. We need to be very careful calling out the past and bringing it up to 2023 and weaponizing it. Okay, so let's say maybe Japan wants to go to war with the United States. You want to talk about one of the worst ideas ever. I would like to think the Japanese are a lot smarter than that, but let's go ahead and get into this. Let's just start with the military budget. $816 billion versus $53 billion. Now, military budgets, it's not the end-all be-all, but in this case, since there is such a difference, this is huge. This goes to show how much of armament, how much more technology the United States has over Japan. Active personnel in the U.S. military, 1.3 million. In Japan, 200,000. Reserve personnel, 799,000, 56,000. Available for military, 73 million versus 27 million, okay? Guys, you have to understand, there is no competition here, okay? Absolutely no competition. Again, I'm sorry I'm even wasting your time. Tanks, 6,000 to 1,000. Armed fighting vehicles, 41,000 to 3,000. Total artillery, 4,000 to 600. Self-propelled artillery, 1.4 thousand to 200. Okay, guys, it's not even a comparison. And so to make the notion of we are currently rearming Japan, the numbers don't lie. The Air Force, 12,000 to 1.4 thousand. Fighter aircraft, 400 to 155. This is actually the closest I've seen so far where, okay, you know what? Maybe we need to be careful. Okay, again, we can go through all of these numbers. I just feel really bad wasting your time. The Navy, total Navy, 460 to 140, okay? So, as you guys can see, yes, Japan, they are being rearmed, but not in the way of, okay, we're gonna get attacked. We need to be very careful of Japan. If anything, any country that you need to be worried about in the Pacific, it definitely is not Japan. It really has to do with China. Oh, and by the way, for those of you that are not aware, this little country of Taiwan has been heavily contested for a very long time. As we know, China has been encircling Taiwan, has been threatening Taiwan, but what you need to understand is that if there's one country who's going to stand with the United States and go and help Taiwan in case anything happens, it's going to be Japan. Because recently Japan made a law saying that if Taiwan gets attacked, this would be enough for Japan to defend themselves. It's essentially going on the offensive to defend yourself because, like, let's say you're standing on a sidewalk and you know your enemy opponent is across from you. You're not just going to stand there and wait to get attacked. You're going to do something about it. This is a preemptive attack, and really even by military law, this could be considered a self-defense act, and the United States is totally okay with this. The United States would love another country to bear the weight of Taiwan if China tries to do something about it. Now, the argumentation is this: if Japan gets involved with Taiwan, this could give Japan more military power. It could create more military aggression. What if they invade Taiwan? But again, the connectors and other sort of technology that's made on Taiwan, Japan gets affected directly from it, and so does the United States. So the last thing Japan needs is for their economy to collapse, because then the United States economy collapse and vice versa. But again, something I want to point out is we are rearming Japan. Yes, we are helping Japan with their military. But again, if Taiwan gets attacked, the one country who's already said they want to help and is going to help is Japan. Now look, I'm not faulting Tulsi Gabbard for making a wild comment. Sometimes we all write crazy things on Twitter, but something else I need to mention is that actually the military of Japan has been suffering for some years now. Recruits are not joining the military because why would you join the military when you can get a perfectly fine job in Japan, okay? So Japan's military has been suffering. Japan's military's budget hardly can cover the cost for its military. It's been a massive problem, and Japan has been dealing with the consequences. They also also have a population issue, as we saw before. Again, people are just simply not joining the military because what's the point when you have a strong economy and everything is going good? Also, there's no motivation to join the military. We're not at war, so why would you join the military, guys? Look, they are people over there too. It's not like the United States is the only country with this patriotism. Japan has their own Japanese pride, and it is what it is over there. But again, this notion, the reason why I'm making this video, is you need to understand, in the context of 2023, Japan is in no position whatsoever to attack anyone, let alone the United States. They can hardly defend themselves because of their military budget. That is why the United States continuously puts bases on Japan and is doing whatever it takes to help Japan, because the second we abandon Japan, the second we stop giving them any sort of weapons or technology, China and Russia is right there. They're there for the easy pickings, and not only that, Taiwan will most likely fall, because again, if any country is going to step up and use their military, and Japan has a very strong military, it's going to be Japan who goes in to help Taiwan with the United States, and that's what the United States' biggest focus is right now in the Pacific. No one can let Taiwan fall because Japan's economy will crash, and so will the United States.